Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. I just having a little chat before we went live. So this is the gorgeous Alex Dahl, who I've been reading Cabin Fever by all day and finished about 15 minutes ago. And there's so many things that I want to say and I can't because I don't want spoilers. But introduce yourself, give everyone a little hint of what Cabin Fever is about.
Hi, I'm Alex Dahl. I'm the author of Cabin Fever, which is a psychological thriller set in
Mm.
Norway. Um, it is about a therapist and her client, um, and they get caught up in a bit of a deadly game in the deep Norwegian woods.
That must be a really fun thing to write about. I've never been to Norway, but the woods are something I find really fascinating.
Yeah, it was a really interesting setting for a novel. It felt very close to home because I was actually living quite remotely in Norway at the time, um, and while I was writing the book, and so it felt quite claustrophobic, which I tried to infuse into the
It
book as
definitely
well.
worked.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's that thing
It
where you
felt
feel like
intense.
somebody's sitting on your chest at times.
That's how it felt for me.
That must be quite just writing that kind of it's really hard not to give anything away, isn't it? That
Yeah.
the intensity of the book, does that take a toll on you writing something like that?
Yeah, I can do for sure. I mean, I think, this is my fourth thriller. I do have slightly more strategies for that now
Mm,
than,
that's good.
with book number one and two. I found with my second that it hit me very, very hard, which was a sort of bereavement thriller, and it was very dark.
Mm.
Um, with this one, I think I've become a bit more conscious of, allowing myself to switch off at the end of the day and being
Yeah.
like, this is work and this is not work. But, when you're writing an intense and claustrophobic thriller about, you know, people who do dangerous and scary things in the woods, and then you're also in those woods, then it's quite easy to sort of take work home. And it made me paranoid. I'd look out the window and be like, oh my God. So, yeah, definitely,
See,
definitely.
I'm laughing. It's not really that funny, is it, in the moment? But I know that you're on your phone and you can't see, but already the thing at the side of me is scrolling with comments and hellos from people.
Oh, okay.
Um, so we've got, I can't see who the messages are from everybody. So I have got my phone as well to have a little look. So Tony Millington says hello to us both, and so does Laura Hamilton. So hello, Tony and Laura.
Hi.
Daniel McBreakneck, hello. One of our admins, I believe this question's from. Do you live in Norway?
I have been living in Norway for on and off. So we've split our time really between London and Norway for a
Mm.
while. And then because of the pandemic and lockdowns, we had about 2 years in Norway full time now. And now I'm back in the UK. So it's been a back and forth. Yeah, a bit of back and forth actually. But
Yeah, it must be frustrating when you live in two different countries and then you suddenly you're in one.
yeah, I mean, I'm very mindful that so many people have had it much, much worse than me and during this pandemic. So it's kind of difficult to whinge about the fact that I can't split my time between two countries. But for me personally, that has been, it's been difficult because I've been doing it for years, and
Yeah,
all of a sudden it's like you can't leave the country, and yeah, that has felt very claustrophobic for me.
I can imagine. I mean, you are allowed to, things do happen to all of us. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're allowed to feel how you feel in your own situation. That is okay.
Yeah.
Um, Oh, Kaz, one of our admins, one of the group's founders, loves Norway and the sheer joy of visiting there. So, do you split your time equally again now?
Um, Not really. I mean, I intend to be more in the UK in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah, my partner has just got a new job here, and so we are going to be here most of the time. Um,
We've got one of our members who I regularly talk to about books, Leslie Lloyd, who says hello to us. Kaz is saying, must buy this if Sam thinks it's so good. It is so good. When we were talking this morning that I said I managed to get a bit of a lie in this morning just to read more. I thought the second I get out of bed, it's game over. All the kids will want something, and there's so much, if you're a mum, there's so much going on.
Yeah.
So it was nice to just be able to stay in bed. And my husband had got up, so I rested the book on his pillow because he wasn't in the way. It was quite a luxury. But you are very dark.
I do try.
It works really well. The relationships in the book.
Yeah.
There are so many complex relationships. So you seem to have a really good balance with, and I've literally finished it 15, 20 minutes ago. So it's very, very, it's right here. It's really hard not to say certain things. But the relationships, you've got family dynamics, you've got friendship dynamics, you've got obviously Leah and Christina, therapist and client dynamics.
Yeah.
That's a lot to balance. Did that take a lot of planning?
Yeah, it did. It did take a lot of planning. I wanted it to be very character driven, as well as plot driven. I mean, I put a lot of thought and effort into the actual plot and the structures. And I suppose I believe that characters need to be like people to be believable. They need to be multifaceted and, to, I like them to be good and bad. I like them to be conflicted in some sense because it's that conflict that holds my interest as well. So I think characters like people, they can't be black and white, and that takes a lot of thought, I suppose, to get that balance to the point where I feel okay about it. It's important to me to know all the characters really well and the dynamics between them and the relationships. And with Cabin Fever, like you say, there were a lot of different kinds of relationship, like romantic, like therapeutic relationship, which is probably the focal one in this book for me, was getting that very vulnerable but hugely important relationship between therapist and client. To get that right was important.
And you've certainly packed a punch with it because you think you know where things are going, and then something happens, and then you think, I see where that's going now, and then something else happens, and the more you get through the story, the more surprises there are. That's got to have been, you must have been thrilled to bits when you got to the end and when it was done and edited and ready to go, and you have the final read through, doing line edits and all of that. You must have been like, this is really good. You must have been so proud. No,
that stage
sorry
of the
if you can hear
process.
thunder.
Oh, is it thunder?
I'm in Manchester and you're in London. I don't know what the weather's like
Yeah,
there,
no,
but
it's all right here right now.
we finally got a bit of a break in the weather today, and I can hear thunder very loudly.
I hope it's not right overhead. Yeah, no, to be honest with you, like the line edit stage and that part of the process is the worst part for me, because I get my favorite part is probably the initial planning and just setting out with the writing and the very creative flow phase. I do enjoy edits because that's when you really see something come together more in terms of becoming a novel, I suppose. But that final stage of final read-throughs and line edits, then I get really panicked because that tends to happen around the time of the final deadlines. So I'm already exhausted and in a crazy frame of mind where I feel like this is just crap. and then I send it off like reluctantly because I'm always like, oh, there's something wrong with chapter 9, or and then once I get it back again, for the very, approved stage, or if there is something and I need to read through again, after a bit of distance, that's a good time because then I feel, oh, okay, so it's not as awful as I felt like it was when I sent it off. And then I tend to read it a few more times. And then I kind of reconnect with it and tend to become more happy with it. That's happened every time like that. So I have this awful, very critical stage. But when you get it back in book form and you feel like, okay, I'm proud of this. This is what I wanted to do with the book. That's a great feeling.
And you
That's
should
really
be.
great.
I mean, just before we went live, I said to you, I mean, I don't, hopefully you can't tell now, but I have cried. I've been drawn into things. I have gasped at different things happening. And I felt that tension with characters in certain moments where you're literally holding your breath. It's almost like, it's not like reading it, it's like watching it on a screen in your head as it's going. It's,
Wow.
it's such an impactful story.
Oh, that's so great for me to hear. To for the book to be out there and to find readers who connect with it. That's amazing.
So, what was publication day like for you? Did you manage to celebrate in any way?
Yeah, so I had a lovely lunch with my publicist and my editor. And, because of all the restrictions that were still ongoing at the time, we've decided to do more of a party at a later stage. So we kept it quite low key, but lovely. We had such a nice time. And it felt very festive to have a glass of champagne in the middle of the day and to see the book in, in hardback for the first time, actually.
Was that the
So,
first time you saw it in
yeah.
hardback?
Yeah, so I had just arrived in the UK and was out of quarantine from Norway, and the books had gone to Norway, so I hadn't actually got them here. So it was the first time that I had it in hardback.
So, have you had hardbacks before?
Yeah, I have had them with all four.
So it's really
Oh,
loud.
is
I
that the
don't know
thunder?
if you can hear it or
Yeah,
not,
I
but
did hear that. Yeah.
it's really loud. Somebody has asked, I think it's Kaz, it is, what kind of research do you do for your books?
Um, well, okay, so I do quite a lot of geographical locational research. It's mostly because, well, I think it's important, of course, but also I love that part of it. I really like to select the exact location and really build those images in my head and plan quite a lot of the plot around physical locations. It's really important. So with Cabin Fever, I was flying to Norway from the UK, and I was coming in low over sort of southern Norway, close to my house. Well, not very close, but like probably 2 hours drive away, kind of thing. And it was just, I was so taken aback by how wild the landscape was, because it wasn't that far away from, Oslo or where I live. And we were flying and flying, and there was just woods, 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 nothing, 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 and an occasional cabin. And it made me think, what do people do somewhere that remote? Like, why would you go there? And you see these tiny little forested roads that, there were no cars, absolutely nothing. And I saw this one lake, and it was kind of heart shaped. So I took a picture on my phone, and I managed to find it on Google Earth. And then there's a cabin close to it, which was the inspiration for Cabin Fever. And a couple of, sort of intense Google searches unearthed that this particular cabin was for sale. So I was able to go and see it. And
Wow.
yeah, and
But
it
it's a
was just,
real cabin.
yeah, well, it's a real cabin, but it's also one of hundreds of thousands of cabins like it. It's a very typical sort of remote Norwegian cabin. And it is funny because I'm half American, half Norwegian. So I've always felt a bit on the outside of the Norwegian culture as well as the American culture. Um, I suppose I just see them both from the outside and the inside. But the Norwegian camping culture is a real thing. Like they like to go to these very remote, basic places and chop wood and carry water from cisterns, and personally, it's not really my
Not your
thing.
thing.
No, it's really not. But I've grown up with it as as something that people do. But for the research for this book, I did try to stay in a cabin like that, and it was great. It was great, but I found it kind of frightening to be that close to nature. Or, I mean, I love nature, and I really feel um, good being in a more natural setting than a big city, for example. But safety wise, I kind of
That
felt like there's nobody
isolation.
here. Like,
Yeah.
I will get axe murdered here, like fact. That's how I felt. I could never go to such a place every weekend and feel relaxed. But this is the psychological thriller writer mind working, I suppose.
Yeah.
I found it terrifying, frankly. I'm glad I did it for the book, but I was terrified. Yeah.
There is something sinister about every simple situation that when you're writing crime, you look around and you think, don't like that. There's absolutely no reason not to like it, but
Yeah.
something unsettling, and then you store it away for another day
Yeah.
of writing. It does kind of sound idyllic to me, but then I don't know that I'd want to be in a cabin in the woods on my own, and not after reading Cabin Fever. It's not happening.
I mean, it is idyllic. Like on one level, I kind of crave that wilderness,
Mm,
but I suppose I've just had to realize that I'm the kind of person who needs to see a restaurant, like, the other side of the woods or something. Like, for me, to think that I could walk for 2 days and not meet anybody, terrifying.
no,
Even though you're probably so much safer than in a big city,
you
you
just
know?
don't maybe feel it.
Nope.
Will Templeton, who is one of our admins and wrote an amazing book, and he's supposed to be working on book 2, needs to hurry up. Hi, Will. Has asked, do you plot extensively before starting? So you did say that you do some planning. Do you know the whole thing? Did you know the ending and everything before you started?
Sorry, I didn't hear the middle part. Could you just repeat the question?
Do you plot the whole thing? I know you've
Um,
said you plot a bit, but do you have the whole thing kind of outlined and the ending and everything before you start?
yes and no. Like, yes, I do, but it tends to change beyond all recognition. I'm sure to my editor's great pain. But with this one, I thought I was going to go in quite a different direction. And then when I was writing it, it takes on a life of its own, and certain things have to change. And to me, it's important to stay in touch with that intuitive sense as a writer. Like, I would rather go with a very big change that hasn't really necessarily been cleared with my editor, for example, um, because I know that it's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
Like, I would rather have that conversation and be like, so, that character, I'm gonna have to kill them, or I'd rather have that conversation than to just follow the plan. Because I believe that creativity and intuition are absolutely necessary to each other. So yes, I do plot, and I have the best of intentions to stick to it, but it hasn't happened yet. So I will always go with intuition, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Um, T, who's one of our admins and an author as well, has asked if you have a favourite character. So it doesn't just have to be from Cabin Fever, from any of your books. Do you have a favourite?
Mm, mm. They are all, yeah. I mean, I have felt a connection to all of my sort of main characters in the books.
I think it would be hard not to.
Yes, so I wouldn't have made them main characters if I didn't feel that connection. It's incredibly important for me to understand them and to really get under their skin in terms of motivation, especially when you're writing crazy people who do evil things, for example, because then it's like, I don't want to write hollow baddies.
Mm,
So if I'm going to make somebody do something that is questionable for most people, then I have to really, really grasp what would make somebody do that. And so when you get that close to them, it's hard not to also care about them. And, even though they might be, nuts or whatever. Um, Cecilia, the main character in my first book, The Boy at the Door, is very dear to me. She was such an insistent voice when I wrote that book that I think I could write another 5 books in her character, and I would just instinctively know how she would take things or what she would do. Um, and she was so much fun for me to write because she's a horrible person. Um, but she
I'd be
owns
amazed
it.
how many authors say that, how much fun they have with the really horrible characters.
I mean, she's mean and just hideous, but she totally owns it. And she's funny about it, I think, like funny for me to write. So sometimes I miss her. Like the other day I was at Starbucks and they asked my name for the coffee and I don't know what happened. It must have been some mental glitch, but I said Cecilia and I didn't realize until they called my name and I was like, where is my coffee? And finally I was like, oh my God, Cecilia, that's me. Well, it's not me, but in that moment I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to take this therapy. Um, so, she's probably the one that I was the most connected to in that sense. Um, with Cabin Fever, I felt with both the main female characters, I really enjoyed creating them.
Mm.
And actually, with all three of them, there are actually three main female characters. Um, I suppose I feel like I have infused a little bit of me into all of them. Um, but yeah, I think it's very important to really want to write your characters and feel connected to them, for sure.
So it is written from three main characters' points of view. I don't know if you want to say who all of them are. I don't know if that's kind of a bit of a.
I think that's okay if you don't think it's too much of a
I don't think it is, but it's your book,
spoiler.
so
Yeah, so there's
explain how your chapters are laid out.
yeah, so there's Christina, who is the psychotherapist, and she's married to a very high profile man. He is the Conservative Party contender for prime minister in Norway. Um, she is a very highly respected doctor of psychology and trauma and practices as long-term psychodynamic therapy. Um, the other sort of main character is Leah, who's one of her clients. Leah is a Swedish novelist who's had pretty difficult life experiences, which is what brought her to therapy in the first place. So her first book was about domestic abuse and her survival of, very difficult relationship. And she's a well-known Scandinavian author, and they have a good therapeutic bond. We've been seeing each other for several years. But then something happens that really throws both of them into this whole other situation, and yeah, basically triggers all kinds of crazy action.
And then the third main character is the other one that the chapters they all come from one certain point of view, don't they?
Yes. So the third main character is Elizabeth, who has also had a difficult life. She is a trauma survivor as well. She's not one of Christina's clients, but they do have a relationship. They are connected. Um, and she is a heroin addict who is in a residential art program as a treatment for her addiction. And they are, yeah, they're all written close to the three women, following them in the present.
There must have been. I know we've talked a bit about research, but there must have been details that you had to go back and kind of finesse once you've got
Oh.
through the story. There's just so many different settings and so many places, and obviously staying in a cabin. I mean, there must have been so many things that you had to do.
Yeah, there is always a lot of making sure of the sensical stuff. Obviously, just making sure that anything that is mentioned in one chapter is followed through in the next one. And because I layer the books the way that I tend to do, and especially with Cabin Fever, where you have 3 or 4 storylines that weave in and out of each other in different time zones, it is sometimes very difficult to know who knew what when, and when do you give this bit of information,
Mm.
and then that one, and then that person didn't know that when that happened, and so that could not have happened. That there's a lot of that. It's
Yeah.
probably the biggest part of the editing process for me is going back over that stuff and foolproofing the structures.
We've got so many questions. I'm just glancing at my phone so that I can see who they're from.
Yeah.
So, let me see. Donna Morfitt says hi to us both. Hi, Donna. Laura Hamilton says, I think Will Dean is living that life now. So Will Dean lives in a remote cabin with his huge dog, whose name escapes me, but I'm sure somebody will tell me. It does kind of sound idyllic, but always, I don't know, at the same time, it does sound terrifying. It sounds like the kind of thing you think you'd really want to do, and then you get it and you think, why did I think this would be a good idea? Is that how you felt staying in the cabin?
Yes, definitely. I felt like it was absolutely necessary for me as the writer to spend.
Did you go on your own?
Yeah, I did. I was going to I was going to stay for 2 or 3 nights. I thought it would be like a great time to get away from everything and just write, you know. I'm busy in my life most of the time, and I just thought, well, I'll just go out into the woods and write. And I was pretty ready to get picked up like the next morning. I mean, I did sleep because I'm quite a good sleeper, even if it's somewhere scary. But I had to work pretty hard at not freaking out, for sure. For sure.
One of our authors, Tony Forder, hi Tony, says, who is your favourite fictional character? So you've already, and he also asked which of your own is your favourite, but you've already talked about that a bit. So do you have somebody else's favourite fictional character?
I do. Very far removed from thrillers and the kind of, this kind of universe. But my favorite book of all time is Gilead by Mary Lynn Robinson. And I just love the Reverend John Ames. Like, he's my favorite character. Yeah. I mean, I have loads of favorites, I suppose, but he is probably the favorite.
It is hard not to have lots of favourites depending on what mood you're in and what you've recently read and what you're going back to read again. Yeah, it is hard not to have a lot of favourites. You must get asked a lot of tricky questions. We really put you on the spot. Pluck a name out of your head.
Yeah, just right now. What's your favorite?
Will also wants to know, has your writing style changed since your first book?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think so, perhaps a little bit. I think anyone's writing style will change in the sense that you evolve as a person and as a writer. So I guess you choose to write what feels important to you at that time, and that will be influenced by so many things. I think I suppose personally, I have become more conscious of wanting to use my platform and my voice as a thriller writer to talk about things that feel important to me, and I suppose every writer feels like that. But for example, like my next book is about human trafficking. It will touch on the Me Too movement, on the way that women are treated in certain industries, for example. And I'm not sure I would have handled that 5 years ago, but I want to now. So in that sense, yeah, definitely.
So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you one of my new favourite questions to ask, which is, if you can tell us without it giving anything away, what was the last scene that you wrote?
What was the
last scene that you wrote, if you can say it without giving it away?
Yes, I think I can. I wrote a scene in which one of my protagonists for my next novel, the one after Cabin Fever, is being taken somewhere against her will, and she is restrained in quite a distressing way. And it's written in the first person, present tense, very close to the victim of this situation. And she's on a boat, and it was quite it was quite an interesting and disturbing thing to do, to try to imagine what exactly she would be feeling in that moment, because she can't really see anything. So it's trying to think of things like, I suppose sometimes when you're writing, it's easy to describe what your character sees. But in this particular instance, it was what would she feel and hear. And so I worked a lot with things like the sound of the ocean. And she doesn't know that she's on a boat, but she guesses based on the motion of the sea and, the sounds eventually. But it felt like something that I'd like to do moving forward is to think more about those things all the time. Like, what are they actually hearing and feeling in the moment?
It is a really brave subject to write about. I always admire people who can write it, because I don't think I could, and I find it obviously a difficult thing to read. So I do think that must be another one that's just you're gonna have to work so hard to separate yourself from.
Yeah,
Go from sitting somewhere writing all of this kind of thing to go back to putting a smile on and being mum, and
that's
it
hard.
must be quite a difficult thing.
It is. And I think I have, again, maybe back to the evolving as a writer thing, I think I have consciously placed certain things closer to my own life in the last couple of books. And that sounds like a sort of exercise in self-torture, and maybe it is on some levels. But like, for example, with Playdate, my book before, Cabin Fever, I have a girl who is abducted on a play date, and the child is of a very similar age to my own daughter. And it's impossible to write that book without, on some level, using that maternal feeling. Of course you do. And my own daughter went missing for a couple of hours while I was writing the book. And it was absolutely awful. I mean, it wasn't anything like what happens in the book, but she was unaccounted for a couple of hours, which, is absolutely terrifying. And again, with Cabin Fever, I have used certain things quite close to me in the book very deliberately. For example, the names of the characters. The three best friends, Christina, Trina, and Elizabeth, they're the names of my childhood best friends, quite deliberately. One of them went traveling in Venezuela, which is also something that gets touched on in the book. The therapeutic relationship is definitely something that I have explored in my own life, and wanted to write about.
I think that's another brave thing to do. Lots of people might kind of hint at things that are from their own lives, but to really go there with it, that's another thing that really comes through. I did wonder if there was an element of truth in anything, not all of it, hopefully, but if there was an element of truth to the book. And how did your friends feel about being named as characters?
Well, I did ask. I said, okay, I'm thinking about calling them this because it would be a kind of it felt like an interesting thing for me to do, to really sort of get even closer to that notion of very close childhood friendship.
Yeah.
So I have two of my best friends in Norway, Trina and Elizabeth, and I have been very close friends since our early teens. And with that friendship, it's been a big pillar in my life. And of course, they have not had the experiences of these characters in the book. But by calling them that, it was almost like it gave me slightly more access into that teenage, young female friendship that feels so nuanced and so intense.
Yeah.
And it changes when you're an adult. But when I called them Trina and Elizabeth, it brought me back to that early stage of, best friends who do everything together. And it was important for me to reconnect with that, which, if you've read the book, that so much of what happens is informed by those little, almost unspoken exchanges between them. So that was an interesting thing for me to do, to bring things a little bit closer to home.
Did they read the book?
I think they both just got it, actually, because, with the delays of shipping to Norway and with the pandemic and stuff. So yes, I think they both just got it. So.
What do you think they'll think of the characters? Are the characters are the characters anything like them at all?
No.
No. Okay.
It's more a naming thing, definitely.
Nice thing to do.
Yeah, it was everything else is made up, but I do quite often use one thing that's real, and then I just project out of that particular spot. So, for example, the Trina in my life did go traveling extensively in Venezuela, and she helped me with the research into the South American connection in the book. But she didn't have those kinds of experiences in Venezuela. That's all me making stuff up. Yeah.
Anyone who reads this will eventually understand why I'm laughing. They had very different experiences.
Yeah.
Laura Hamilton agrees. She says, I think anything involving children and animals is often a spiky or emotive topic, which it obviously is going to be. Anything involving anything traumatic at all is going to bring a lot of emotion to the subject. And I said, I've cried today, and then furiously tried to pull myself together just to be ready, so I didn't look quite as I think I was quite a little bit pale before from crying, and thought, you need to stop it now, Sam.
I'm sorry, I made you cry.
No, it was I generally, I don't know. It was, I actually wrote a note down that I've stuck somewhere. I completely understand the term hauntingly beautiful now. That's what I wrote down. That'll be going in the review. I was looking then, I'm covered in post-it notes with different things written on. So I knew it was on a yellow one. So it's such a, see, I'm back in the book now. I'm back in certain things. It's such a difficult thing to do, to write in such a beautiful way. And before we came on, I did say I've got little sticky notes for things in the book that I wanted to read out, but you've already seen me knock everything over once, so I'm not doing it twice. The book is staying there. But you have such a way with words. It's this thing that really pulls you in, and then suddenly you breathe and you're like, that was so beautifully written, even when it's something that's so haunting, something that's so shocking. You have such a way with words.
Thank you.
How hard is that to kind of achieve? Does that just come naturally to you?
Yeah, it does actually. The actual writing, yes, that is for me the easier part. Is again, it comes back to the intuitive thing. I feel like the writing itself is it's almost like out of body experience. It is like going into a space that you can't access in any other way. And what happens there is something I can't quite compute, because it is a special thing. And then quite often I'll open my computer the day after and reread what I did the day before, and I don't recognize half it. I do not remember writing it. So sometimes I'm like, oh, that's bad, or that's not so bad. It's always a surprise to me what happens in that space, and I've become quite radical about preserving that space because I see that it's important. Again, a lot of stuff does get tweaked in edits, but with all of my 4 books, there are big chunks, like whole chapters, several whole chapters that have not been touched in edits at all, almost like not even a comma, because and those are the parts of the book that have happened in that most intense writing space. So I am a big believer that when you really listen to that inner voice and what the book is trying to get you to do, then it will be good. But sometimes a novel is a strange beast. It needs a lot of parts, not just that chapter or this chapter. So there has to be a wholeness to it, and that takes a lot of editing and a lot of overview work to it, I suppose. But I'm generally happiest with the writing that happens in that kind of intense zone kind of writing.
So let's go to your writing routine. Do you write every day? Do you have a break between books? What's the process like for you?
Um, I don't write every day at the moment. I've had a little bit of a break. Um, just a sort of natural lull between edits and starting the new book and that kind of thing. I tend to work very intensely. So when I'm working, I work a lot and in very big chunks of like I'll quite often do between 5 and 10,000 words a day, which
Wow.
takes so much out of me that it
Mm.
also demands some recuperation time after. That seems to work better for me than to do 1,500 2,000 a day, which I have tried to do. um, I find that being very sort of completely in the zone works better.
Mm.
um, so I prefer to work on retreat, go away for a week and come back with 25,000 words. That would be my ideal way of working. And then leaving it completely for 3 weeks and just, you know, doing other stuff, answering emails and watching Netflix and, talking about a book. But yeah, I feel like it takes a lot out of me to do the creative part of it. And so, yeah, it works best to do it very intensely and then kind of go back over it and reread it and reconnect with it after.
What did you learn from writing book one that has changed you as a writer throughout writing the next three and obviously onto book five?
Um, I think I learned a lot about taking it from a sort of half novel into publishable quality, like what it takes to bring the book up to the level that it can go to your editor and then ultimately to your readers,
Mm.
um, which you can't know before you do it. So I had done an MA in creative writing, and that was a good way of preparing for this kind of work. It gave me loads of good industry pointers and contacts, I suppose. Like
Yeah.
it made me understand how the agent process works, all of that. But nothing except for actually publishing a book can prepare you for that. Um, so that has got much easier. That's got with book 3 and 4, I noticed that something shifted.
Mm.
I know what is needed of me and what isn't at that particular stage. Um, in terms of the actual writing process, I'd probably say that there's a lot more work on characterization specifically and the people in the book
Mm.
than I I grasped before I really did it. So now I know when I'm not anywhere near done with someone before I start working on them properly.
One thing I really found was the depth of characters. You feel like you've just read this intimate story about friends or this intimate story about people that you know. You know, they feel really real, which I think is where the emotion came into it. You do feel like you come up for air and you think, okay, this isn't actually real. This hasn't happened to people, but it really feels like it has.
That's good. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
it just I keep marveling over how much work must have gone into that, which leads into T asking, do your characters take over the keyboard? So you were talking about this really intense few days that you have.
Mm.
Do you feel like they take over?
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
feel
I
like you're
think
in control of it the whole time.
I think I let them take over and that they have to for a bit. There is a stage. Somebody said to me the other day, it's like, oh yeah, it's almost like method writing, method acting, method writing. And somebody asked me like, did you almost like go into the characters? And at first I was like, no, no. And then I was like, yeah, maybe a little. So you kind of you go there all the way there with them, I suppose, and maybe increasingly. So I think with Cabin Fever, definitely, I wrote the book in in full lockdown, and it was a real escape for me at that time. And I was literally in the woods. I mean, I was in a town, so not woods, but near woods that I would go to for research all the time and make myself walk around alone. So it did feel a bit like method writing. And I think one of the things that I've also really learned in the process of going from unpublished to publishing one book to now number 4 is that being a writer means many different things at different stages of the process. So it's not just the writing. And sometimes people will say to me, like my lovely partner, for example, will say to me, "So, what did you do today, honey?" And I'm like, "I went for a drive and I was thinking." And sometimes I just think, "Ooh, should I have been doing something more today?" But so much of what I do is actually just thinking about this stuff. And most of that characterization happens on things like me going for a drive, and I have to pull over and take notes on my phone. That happens all the time. So now I've allowed myself to just be like, this is also work. Just sitting here and thinking about these people and having their conversations in my head is apparently my job, which is not complaining, but sometimes it feels strange that is a day's work, but it is.
So do you write full time now?
Yeah, I have done since the first one. So
That's got to feel amazing. If that was the goal, then that has to feel incredible.
it was the goal, and I've never wanted to do anything else. It's always been the goal. That being said, I'm starting to realize how much I also appreciate the other side of being a full-time writer, such as having conversations about the book. You know, like today, it's a great thing to connect with readers and with people who are interested in writing, as well as just doing the writing. And I joke with my publishers they're just so lovely, and they have this beautiful office of lovely people in it, and I'm like, can't I just have a desk here in the corner so we can like hang out by the coffee machine, because I get lonely in my little office. And that's happened a bit. That's what I dreamed about. I want to be all by myself and just write all day, and then you get what you wanted, and then I'm like, I'd like to be in an office space, really. So, yeah.
No, I know the feeling. Laura Hamilton has asked a question that was one of mine I was going to ask. Have you ever acted out a scene whilst writing? So is there anything that you've had to kind of get the dynamics of it perfectly right? I've done this. I have acted things out just to check something that I'm editing for somebody, or just to, my husband doesn't enjoy it. He has no say in it. But have you ever done that?
Yeah, definitely. But mostly like conversational. So I will read or even speak out loud like certain conversations between characters, because someone once said to me that actual conversation will sound different in real life than on the page. And it's a good test if something is working or not, to just actually say what they're saying. And quite often if I do that, I'm like, he wouldn't have said it like that. So I change things, but it's mostly conversation. I don't like, run around outside to like act out a scene. I haven't done that yet, but
I've not done it outside.
in the woods.
Oh no. No,
not doing that.
No, definitely not interested in doing that.
No.
I'm just slightly thinking I may have a leak. This weather is insane.
Is it really coming down?
Be absolutely fine. How far into book 5 are you at the moment?
Not as far as I should be, but I'm allowing myself all that driving around and thinking time right now. I do have about just over a quarter is done. I'm working a bit differently this time. I'm probably going back and editing more as I go along, and then doing another creative bit and then editing again. I don't know why, but it's felt more right this time. Maybe again because of more experience, I can see that some of the structure has to be in place before I can do the latter half of the book. And again, I've got several points of view, different time zones. It's a very complex story. So I'm finding that I'm needing a lot of time to think about it and really get into characters. And again, placing it very close to home. I've named the main character after my own daughter deliberately to make myself angry enough to do her justice. So
That is quite a, can I say, ballsy move on camera?
also, my daughter's like, "When are you going to name someone after me?" So I was like, "Well, you can be the main girl in my next book, but it's not
Oh, so
exactly
she's
like."
asked for this. Okay.
Yes, yes,
I'm
she
guessing
was
she doesn't realise what
furious.
she's asking for.
She was furious with cabin fever that I named Trina and Elizabeth after my two friends who she knows very well. She's
Mm.
like, "Why not me?" And I was like, "Well, because you're not my childhood friend." So she gets to be Anastasia in my next book.
Wow. That's I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could use. I find it difficult to use names of people that I really know in the moment.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
yeah, that's quite a strong move.
It feels like quite a strange thing to do, but again, my this character is a young girl who goes into an industry in the modeling industry in Milan. And she's a very strong character and she's somebody incredibly powerful, which is why I do feel okay also naming her after my own child,
Yeah.
because I would love for my daughter to grow up feeling empowered. Um, but yeah, it does feel like it brings it very close to home, actually.
Leslie Lloyd has asked, where is the location for the next book? Have you got a title yet? Can you tell us anything about it yet, or is it just too soon?
Yeah, so this one actually doesn't have a title yet, which is the first time that I've started really writing a book without a title, and I'm kind of desperately searching for a title at the
Oh,
moment.
it'll hit you at
I
some
have a
point.
couple of things in mind, but it's set in Milan and in Norway, and sort of a couple of other European locations in transit, and
Mm.
it's going to be looking at the modeling industry, human trafficking, kind of jet set life and the kinds of people who populate that world. And it's a thriller. I mean, it's definitely a psychological thriller.
I can
And
believe
I
it just
hope,
from reading Cabin Fever.
I mean, I hope it's really female empowering as well as I think it's going to probably be quite hard to write because there's a lot of awful things in those industries that we should talk about, and I think that those kinds of conversations need to happen not only in the media but also in fiction.
I agree. I just don't think I'm the one that's brave enough to write them, so I'm glad that you are. So,
Well,
yeah, it's definitely a difficult but necessary subject for discussion.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Leslie Lloyd likes how elegant your china cup is,
Oh,
which is really lovely.
thank you.
I'd like to ask one of my. I used to ask this all the time, but I don't think I've asked it for a while. Memorable moments for you as an author so far. What really stands out for you?
Um, I think I think it was when my first book was sold to quite a few countries at around the
Which
same
we haven't
time.
even discussed yet.
That was, I do remember specifically like when my American contract came in, that was a really big deal because it went to auction in New York and I was at dinner with friends and I saw that I had like 4 missed calls from my agent, and that was kind of everything I had dreamed would happen. So when that happened, that was really fantastic. And recently, and this is actually the first time that I'm talking about this, but recently Playdate was auctioned for TV, which is really exciting and something that I've wanted for a very long time. So I'm very pleased about that and hoping to follow that process quite closely. There have been a lot of moments, but to be honest, like my favorite moment is having a completely clear day and just writing. I don't have that many of those days, not as many as I'd like, and it always feels quite special to know that you have the whole day to just give yourself to it, you know?
I love those answers. It's really exciting. Congratulations being optioned for
Thank you.
TV with Playdate. That's
Thank
fantastic. What a
you.
call that must have been.
Yeah, that was really exciting. And yeah, it was quite a long process before it was a kind of done deal. But because there were a couple of companies that wanted to do it, so I had conversations with them, and it was so interesting to hear people talk about what their ideas were to bring something that you've written to the screen. So that was amazing, and definitely a dream come true to have that interest in the book. That was great.
And on that really exciting note, we're out of time.
So
The hour has flown.
it has.
Do you want to give people a recap of what you've written so far and where they can buy them from?
Yeah, so my first book was The Boy at the Door, which came out in 2018. And I've also written The Heart Keeper, which is about a heart transplant. And it's a psychological thriller, but it's also a grief novel. Um, it's very dear to me, that book. It's very special to me. It felt dark to write, but also important. So I like to talk about The Heart Keeper. Playdate came out last year and is quite a fast-paced sort of abduction for Playdate story, and Cabin Fever, which is out now, from all the usual retailers, really, from Amazon, Waterstones, anywhere that you can buy books generally.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I've been in your head all day.
Well,
So
yeah.
sitting talking to you now, it's quite surreal. Sitting getting to talk to you about it just after finishing the book has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank
Well,
you
thank you
to
for having me.
all of the admins and members who've watched.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
and
you
thank you
for
for having
joining
me.
us. You can come back anytime. You've been a joy.
Thank you.